I want to welcome you all to Disability Voices United Communication Access Connect, which we're having on a scheduled basis, just for you mark your calendars, the third Tuesday of every month at 4 p.m. But I first want to turn, before we get started into the deep of it, I want to turn it over to Lorna, our Spanish translator. Go for it, Lorna.
Muy buenas tardes a todas las personas que hablan español. Estamos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. En su computadora lo va a encontrar en la parte de abajo de la pantalla, el icono de mundito. Desde ahí selecciona su canal, español. Si no quiere escuchar el inglés, seleccione silenciar audio original. Las personas que están en tableta o en teléfono móvil va a encontrar la función de interpretación en los 3 puntitos al lado de su pantalla, desde donde selecciona audio y desde ahí selecciona interpretación. El resto es igual. Gracias. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have our presentation and our dialogue here, but I want to remind you all that use the chat, especially since we're talking with AAC users who often want to use the chat. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to both there, and that depending on how many people are participating, we'll probably ask people to come live as well, but for sure use the chat. And if you have any questions, Ed Hersel is our tech person today, and you can message her in your chat and ask her what the issue is. What Lorna was saying was at the bottom of your screen, there's a icon that says EN. Mine says EN because mine's on English. It's a little world sign. Okay, click on that world sign and you'll have choices. If you're going to listen to this in English, you need to press English. Okay, don't do off, do English. So everybody wants to engage that system, please. All right. Okay, I think that's everything that I'm supposed to say. Otherwise, Ed, jump on if I forgot something. Well, hello and welcome. We're excited that you're here today. The CDAN group, the Communication Disabilities at, oh, I forget my A word. Access. I'm gonna forget the word access. I have too many acronyms in my head. Anyways, this is our second meeting like this, and we're excited to bring you all together. Today's theme is going to be education. So we want to engage in a conversation with all of us about how to get access or increase access or improve or enhance or whatever word you want to use to describe your needs to have a better quality of life around communication in our educational system. And as the CDAN group was talking, we said we need to talk to Dr. Amy Hanreddy and see if she can come online with us because we love to hear her thoughts of wisdom. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and then afterwards we're going to just engage in a conversation with all of us. So Amy.
Well, I might make you doubt yourselves in that choice. I'll just briefly introduce myself and then I'll share. I did prepare just a couple slides, but I'm hoping to be part of a conversation with all of you. So my name's Amy Hanreddy. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Special Education at California State University, Northridge. My emphasis, I think, throughout my career has been around inclusion in general education for students with particularly the most extensive support needs or complex communication needs. And from the very beginning of my career, which was when I was 18 years old working as a paraprofessional, my work has been focused on supporting individuals with complex communication needs. And so I think that I've really grown a lot of passion for communication access throughout my career. I am always kind of reluctant to call myself an expert in communication just because I feel like for some reason in education, we're discouraged from considering ourselves to be experts in education because all of that is thought to belong to speech language pathologists, who are really critical partners in supporting communication access for all students in educational settings. But I think that sometimes we diminish the role of educators, and in particularly special educators, in supporting and promoting that access to communication. So that's kind of been my my focus in our credential program at CSUN. We do have a course that I teach that's for special educators all around communication access. And so even though I teach a semester-long course, I still feel like I run out of time. And so then when Nina invited me and said, well, we're talk for 15 minutes about what communication access should look like in schools, it's kind of like, I feel like I kind of sat looking at some empty slides and couldn't think of where to even start in a short time. So what I did, I'm going to share my screen. This is what she asked. So I put her question up at the top of the slides. What does it look like to have meaningful communication support in educational settings? And that's a really big question. And so I started to kind of pull together just a bunch of different ideas around what I think some different considerations are related to communication support in educational settings. What I'd like to do is throw out some of those ideas, and then maybe we can, I don't know, Darlene, we can open it up for a conversation, or you all can tell me what I'm forgetting, what I left out, and maybe we could go from there. So just, this is already a complicated slide. And Janice Light and David McNaughton have evolved a theory of communication competence over many years. And it really just started with looking at that top left box, thinking about qualities of an individual and different aspects related to successful communication. And just that box helped us to think about all of these different factors to consider in communication access, that it's never about just handing a tool or a device to somebody, but we have to consider the language piece of it, the operational piece, or how do you activate that tool or device, the social piece, that all communication is based around social needs and social interactions, as well as the strategic piece. But what I think is really valuable about this visual is that you can see from that one box on the left-hand corner how much it's expanded over time as we've started to really widen our lens around what are all of the considerations related to communication access. And what this visual has done over time is expand to include factors that are not just related to an individual with complex communication needs, but all of the considerations related to communication partners, to opportunities, to barriers that are completely outside of the individual, like policies, attitudes, knowledge of facilitators. So we don't need to go through all of this, but I think that it to me, in one visual, kind of summarizes the complexity of all of the considerations that really need to be considered by school teams in starting to examine whether we're really providing quality communication access. Oops. This is something I share on usually one of the first nights of class, in really focusing on moving from a focus on a particular tool or a particular device, and moving towards understanding that access to communication is really about a process of enhancing communication across all environments where individuals participate. And also acknowledging that communication access takes time, and it takes instruction on the part of not just the individual augmented communicator, but also everybody else involved with that individual. And we can never place all of the burden on one person and then see them as either a success or a failure related to communication access. It really has to be a collective effort. I see Ryan Duncanwood is here, and Ryan and I serve on a TASH communication access committee together and have for several years now. And I included a quote from one of our committee members, Grant Blasco, who talked in one of our presentations about, he talked about the complexity really of communication access. So Grant said, rather than depend too much on the communicator's motivation, I encourage communication partners to focus on tactics needed for success. Focus on true coaching of so many separate skills. Be clear and don't leave out the details. And he said that I can honestly say that prior to age 9, some of the biggest factors that affected my ability to communicate were never even addressed in my AAC training. And to me, this really points out all of the things that we're missing when we are teaching educators to provide communication access, particularly if we're not listening to AAC users themselves. One of the things that I try to do, and I feel like I still fail a lot, is working on incorporating the voices of people who have complex communication needs within programs for new teachers, and helping them to see the potential of communication access. I'm realizing I'm probably talking too fast, so I'm working on slowing down a little bit. So another factor to consider is really integrating a variety of expertise that we have access to in a school setting, and engaging in what we call an integrated approach, sometimes called transdisciplinary teaming, which is really just a complicated word to mean that we're all working together and sharing responsibility for students. So in traditional formats in schools, and I see this every day because I collaborate with a lot of schools and districts, we tend to really kind of take pieces of kids and have a variety of professionals kind of focusing on different pieces. So we have our occupational therapist who takes responsibility for the hands. We have our special educator who might take responsibility for the brain, our vision therapist who has the eyes, and often we're all working in isolation. And that really needs to significantly change when meeting the needs of individuals with complex needs, because all of those things interconnect when talking about communication access. And we certainly can't all address needs separately. So you can see this is a picture of JJ, if you're familiar with the TV show Speechless that was popular now. It's already been a few years. But you know, JJ has a wide range of strengths. He's funny, he's kind of a troublemaker in a lot of ways. But if we were only seeing him in terms of his deficits, if we looked at him from a more medical model, we wouldn't really get to appreciate all of the strengths that he has to bring, not just as a communicator, but as a person in general. But when we start to look at JJ in terms of his strengths and identify within particular settings, where are the gaps in his communication access? Where are the communication breakdowns happening? And then use the expertise of everybody involved, whether it's his family or friends or professionals, in addressing some of those mismatches. That's where we start to see a more integrated approach. Really, this probably shouldn't be its own slide. It should be integrated in everything we do, but I feel like I can't talk about kind of core elements without really considering the role of educators within school settings for providing culturally and linguistically responsive supports when considering communication access. Gloria Soto is an amazing resource in terms of the things that she's written about in this area. And this is just a summary from one of her articles, kind of highlighting some of the key considerations related to cultural and linguistic diversity and access to communication. Things that we often don't necessarily see in school settings, or might even see the opposite. Sometimes families of kids or adults who are complex communicators are told that they shouldn't speak their home language or use their home language with somebody who is learning to use an AAC system. And that's certainly not at all supported by the research. So in fact, whatever tools they're using should reflect the language spoken in the home. And it should also be thinking about vocabulary and concepts that are consistent with the student's culture. So that really means that we need strong input from family members in designing those systems and really talking about where the breakdowns are happening. Okay. This is a picture of my friend's son. So he's somebody I know very well, Maceo. And I think that this is a post on the left that she shared about a conversation that happened with Maceo using his PRC, which is a high-tech communication device. So it says, Maceo said, "Hobby hours," while Joe, his dad, was picking what album to put on. When Joe put the music on, Maceo started smiling and moving. So Nettie, who I think is the nurse, then said, "Oh, Maceo likes music as much as you do," to Joe. And Maceo said, "Both." Then Joe said, "That's right, it's both of our hobbies." Then Maceo activated the message window and said, "Hobby hours both," and was grinning his face off as James Brown played. So beyond being a sweet interaction between a kid and his parents, I think this is a really nice example of a conversation. So one of the things that we forget often in educational settings is that the purpose of communication access is to support authentic engagement with other people, right? That's where we get the most pleasure out of our communication, is that opportunity to engage with others. And yet what we often see in educational settings are interviews, questions being posed to students where there's a correct and an incorrect answer. So one of the things we really work on with my teacher candidates is working on providing space for opportunities to comment, to share information, and to ask questions, as well as just opportunities for waiting and not requiring communication and not requiring always a correct or an incorrect answer. Because when we allow that space, then often we get conversations like this with Maceo. That was an authentic interaction that he initiated. Okay, I think this is one of my last points. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about was the connection between communication access and literacy. I think that we tend to, in educational settings, but somehow we put communication in one box and then we put literacy in another box, which doesn't make a lot of sense when your tool for communication, the most clear access to communication for many individuals might involve writing, right? So literacy provides the opportunity for individuals to generate their own original thoughts and ideas, as opposed to relying on individual symbols or pictures to communicate something, which is just going to be inherently limiting. So this is just a visual that has been used many times by many people I appreciate. This is, it's taken from several different articles, but you see the connection here between speaking, AAC speaking, and writing. So we're expressing an idea. So those are both expressive forms. And sometimes writing and speaking might be joined together for somebody with a complex communication need. Similarly, reading or taking in information and listening can be paired together. And I think that we just don't always see those interconnections and overlaps when we're supporting students with more complex needs. Okay, and then I just threw up a slide with a whole bunch of other things that I didn't get to. So I'll just kind of like mention these, and then maybe we can have a conversation. These are all things that I throw in for my students. So one is modeling, making sure that our teachers are prepared and understand the value of modeling using communication tools. It says telemarketer. I'm getting a telemarketer call and it won't turn off. Okay. Robust vocabulary. I was just with a student the other day who was brilliant in using the symbols that she had, but the only things that she could do on her communication device were to ask for different materials around her. So she didn't have a way. She could easily ask for Play-Doh. She didn't have a way to make comments or ask questions. And there was no way, if I wanted to model that for the student, to do that because it didn't exist on her device that she was provided with. So we always want to look at providing more vocabulary than the current student is currently using expressively, and continuing to build vocabulary if it's not already there to begin with. Using a well-supported organization system. So I don't necessarily prescribe to one particular organization system. In my classes, we talk about a variety of them, and I'm not an expert on each of them. But whatever we choose for a student should be well supported. We shouldn't be making it up as we go along. And with the student I was just thinking of that I was supporting the other day, there was no organization system, or I couldn't figure out what the organization system was on her iPad. It was a series of folders where you kind of had to dig and it wasn't intuitive. So that's what we don't want to go there. We want there to be a clear system. We should be incorporating as part of literacy and as part of beginning to build that access to stronger communication, meaningful use of letters from a young age. So if we're teaching and using letters in a meaningful way from the time that children are very young, just like we would if they didn't have a disability, then we're building a strong foundation to use those letters to support communication down the road. I talked about not testing, we teach, we don't test. That's related to that, having a meaningful conversation, not just asking questions. I think we never provide enough wait time, including myself. I don't think I provide enough wait time. And then finally, I think that something that I don't always do well, but I always talk about is really supporting access to AAC mentors, helping students and their families and their teachers to learn from AAC users who are a little bit further down the road, who have done some of the work of figuring out how to build that communication competence and how to engage in authentic interactions using their communication systems. I think that for myself, I think about Ryan, I think about you and Grant and our work on the committee and how much I've learned from you. And I can list several more people that I've learned so much from. And I think that we need to build in opportunities for more people to learn from AAC users without putting too much of a burden on people like you, Ryan. So anyway, those are all of my my random thoughts thrown out, and I'm happy to now just kind of talk and have a conversation with everybody.
That was awesome, Amy. Yeah, I mean, I could just go hang out with you for a weekend. I just wanted to remind people, because you brought up the whole idea of having a well-organized system. And just as a reminder that if you're using a dynamic display or some kind of technology-based system, Proloquo to Go or Touch Chat or something from Dynavox or Toby Dynavox or Prinky Romic or whoever you're using a system from, those systems have already been designed for you in an organized manner. So don't undo them. Don't recreate them. They actually did all the research to figure out what's the best way to organize this. Now there's going to be way too much information probably in it, and there's not going to be personalized when you get it, but take out the stuff you don't want, but don't feel a need to like redesign it, because sometimes you'll go, oh, it's too complicated. You can hide buttons, okay? But if you start, I guarantee you, if you start trying to redesign it yourself, you will end up with a cluttered mess that is hard to then add to. So take advantage of the work they've already done for us. Okay, that was great. I mean, I asked the communicators in the group if they wanted to gather up their thoughts, because I liked how you were putting it, like what were the barriers that they had in education. And I think that would be really a nice place to talk, and there's a whole lot of stuff coming in. So let me see if I can sort it out here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to catch up with the chat here. And I'm so excited. I see so many familiar faces. When I took my screen off, it's good to see everybody.
Yeah. And we're going to want to copy your slides if we can, Amy, so that we can put them in to the recording section when we post that on the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be great. Let me find. Okay, so Johnny, hi Johnny, is saying, can you speak about how public schools view supported typing? My kids are being told by their inclusive district, inclusives in quotes, that this type of communication is controversial and are questioning allowing our kids to have well-trained communication partners support them in school. Makes me wonder if real inclusion really exists in a public school setting.
Yeah, that's a big question and a hard one to answer. I don't know. I mean, I think Darlene, you might be able to help answer that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough one. And I mean, it's tough because people are throwing out the ASHA statement and saying ASHA says we're not allowed to do it. But now I'm just going to be on my pedestal here, which I can do because I have the DVU sign right here. So I can do that. But it's not ASHA statement or APA's a statement, anybody's statement against some form of support that a person would need that goes contrary to what ADA is actually saying, right? It's everyone's right to their access to communication. I'm not quite sure how that is allowed. I know no one's argued it, but I'm just saying, I think it needs to be pointed out personally that you're siding with a professional group that is chosen to go against the ADA because they're denying the accommodations that the person needs to communicate. And I understand all the worries and the wonders and the validity tests and all that kind of thing, but there are responsible ways to accommodate people's communication so that they can express themselves more effectively in school. And they shouldn't be, I don't think the persons who have that need should be, have their educational system downgraded to where their motor system works at this point.
Darlene, if I may cut in real quickly, I have a question from our translator. If you could clarify the acronyms that you've used.
ASHA. Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, so ASHA is the American Speech and Hearing Association, and that's the National Association for Speech and Language People professionally in the United States. And APA is the American Psychological Association, and that is the Association for Psychologists. And they both have made public statements or policies, however it comes out to be, saying that people should not be using support.
And the ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I was trying to remember all the ones I said. Yeah, American Disabilities Act. There you go. Thank you, Amy. All right. So Johnny, I don't know if that helps, but I know it doesn't give you an answer. William has said, we lose humanity. William is a DVU intern here. We lose humanity when we focus on what is different instead of what is possible. And Emily says, beautifully put, William. Ryan said, yes, we do. Evelyn's written something in Spanish. Lorna, can you help us on that? Oh, very well said. Very well said. Anybody have any comments on that? Amy?
I just wanted to say that I completely agree that there's stigma, especially within the Latinx community, around the use of technology and devices, and many feel that it places not just that it's dependence, but also that it kind of places a barrier between the individual and those communicating with them. I think that we really need. I wanted to look at what you're saying, Evelyn. We really need at least I need for my teachers that I'm training to see more examples of members of the Latinx community using AAC. And I would love, if you have a child who's using AAC, I would love to, when we talk about AAC mentors, we really need families to see examples that are not just white middle to upper class kids using AAC. It's really, I think it's really important that we see more diversity in our AAC users.
Tim, you got something?
I have to say something what Arlene just mentioned. For me, personally, I like to build my own system because all of those pre-programmed systems works great to start, but you are forced to learn their system to their particular device. It really limits the user to one device, which I never liked. For me, I have created my own system that helped me be more efficient to my form of communication. But that's just me. I just don't like being restrictive in a box.
All right. Well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, good point.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to add that, Tim, you got to have control over that design. When we're talking about educational settings, often, unfortunately, students have no control, and it's imposed on them. And unfortunately, what's being imposed on them are sometimes very arbitrary and disorganized systems.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were talking about this afternoon about the fact that the other thing this appears to happen often in the school systems, especially, is that someone will be given a device and there isn't much room for growth in it, and it's the people assume that that's it, and so then the opportunity to grow or expand or get a new piece that, based on what's changed in the world of technology, it becomes a challenge for the families to get those next steps met, because it's kind of it's almost, the impression is that we're left with, well, we already talked about that. You have the PEC system, or we already talked about that. You have iPad with GoTalk on it. And so having to have getting those opportunities to grow is a challenge for a lot of people. Ella says, I think someone shouldn't decide our preferred method of communication. Bella's an AAC user. Right.
And when I think about the early phases of somebody's educational career, you know, why do we get locked in so early into one app, just like Darlene was saying, or everybody else is exploring, right? Kids without disabilities are exploring who they are and their identities and how they express themselves. And it seems like a perfectly appropriate time to allow time for exploration. And there's, just like Tim says, he doesn't like necessarily a specific app. He wants to design it himself. But unless you've had experience with different apps and different tools, you can't really, have the background or the context to know what's out there and to make those decisions for yourself.
William wrote, think of students who don't have access to full communication. They sometimes are categorized by systems and not as humans by the limits placed on them. Yeah. So our I think, and to go with that at William, I think what ends up happening sometimes is then we start teaching to what the system can allow for that person rather than teaching to what the student's next step should be and then making sure the system can accommodate that. Like we bring everything down, right? Tim?
Amy, do you think it's up to the SLP to train the child outside of their comfort zone to make sure that they can adapt on their own as they become an adult? That's how I was trained by my SLPN teachers.
Training them outside of their comfort zone. So it sounds like you're really focused, that you worked with somebody who was really pushing you, and continuing to help you to grow. Honestly, I think that's the job of everybody on the school team, not just the SLP. But I also think that that's a fine balance, right? Because we don't want people to experience so much frustration that they find, whatever that support, however that support looks, we don't want that support to start to feel aversive or like a negative experience. And so I think in order to have those high expectations and push, there has to be a close relationship also with the people who are providing that support.
Will says the AAC mentors support teams have to help educate and support everyone to understand that communication is the way to build an inclusive community where everyone is heard and has a voice however it is expressed. Absolutely. I think we talked about this a little bit before, that our theme here that we've noticed in this grant was that people don't seem to understand that communication is the way to build that inclusive environment, and it's seen as its own little entity. Whereas any one of us speaking persons on this call today would never see communication as its own entity. It's what's allowing us to be in this call, right? It's what allows us to prepare for dinner and share our day and say our medical needs and all of that. But for some reason, and when it comes to writing a goal system, whether it be IEP or an IPP, it becomes its own separate entity. And I think I agree completely with you, Will. Bella says, please know we are all not image and category-based communicators. I prefer text-based or typing. Right? Some people have a difficult time using the categories. Their stream of consciousness actually comes out better if it's in a written language format. Ryan said, absolutely. William said, I agree, Bella. I applaud all of you AAC users for jumping on here. I love this. Speaking people can talk too. So if you want to jump in, feel free. I was thinking too, as the group of us that were talking this afternoon about what we wanted to make sure we got to talk about was what kind of goals, I mean, since like I want this group to be really proactive, like what can we do to make some steps and change? So I was thinking, what kind of goals could we have written or suggest or expect or demand, either way, in our individual meetings, our IEPs, our IPPs, that are going to send that message that communication is inclusive. I'm curious as to see what people's ideas are on that. Emily said, I agree with the others. Emily's also an AAC user. Tommy says, nothing better than hearing from the people who are using the communication systems. Yeah, absolutely. Don't stop talking, you guys, keep going. Amy, do you have any suggestions on kind of how to light that fire and shift our expectations on communication goals in education, at least?
I do. I was trying to keep my mouth shut and let the other people talk first, but maybe I'll throw a couple ideas out there.
Yeah.
I think that, when we're looking at kind of like next steps for communication within an educational setting, I think that every communication goal should be based around authentic interactions. I never want to see goals that are so highly specific that that they're not really considering how the student is going to use this communication skill within natural interactions all day long. Last night, I was teaching this class that I was talking about, and we were watching a video of a student in an interaction. It was a student who had limited verbal expressive skills and did not yet have access to an additional tool or device. And so the interaction was all using gestural communication, verbal, like vocalizations with a peer. And so we were watching for, what did we notice? What did we notice that the student's strengths were within the interactions? And what are some things that would help this interaction to be more effective? So one thing we noticed, we kind of used an observation tool. One thing we noticed is that the student was always in the position of responding. So even though it was very sweet interaction, it was sweet in the way that it was one person kind of dominating the interaction, which was the person who uses speech, and then the person who didn't have a tool was always in the position of responding. And so when we were brainstorming, what are some goals or some skills that we might want to work on? We talked about, well, if we focused on initiating, then that would get the whole team. If the goal is to initiate, then maybe that would help the whole team to see this person as having the potential for initiating. And then we would really have to give them more tools in order to do that initiation. And so that could lead to, a more robust communication system. But we were really looking at, like, what are the mismatches within the environment, or what are the breakdowns that are happening, and how can we use communication goals to really work on remediating those mismatches, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. I don't know why it's because of ableism as a buzzword these days or what, but I hear a lot of people talking about the professionals or the adults in the room, or however, the other people, the speaking people's expectation that the communication and the initiation and the turn taking, all that is going to happen according to the way we expect speaking people to do things. And then you miss the opportunity. So if somebody initiates by touching their communication partner on the arm, they initiated, right? It doesn't have to be he brought his device to me to say he wanted to talk, or he went and picked up his device. That doesn't have to be it. There's all different kinds of ways that we initiate. If you know how your person initiates their communication, and it's through some physical, nonverbal vocalization, however it goes, personal way of doing it, the whole team needs to recognize, I think, that is their initiation. And then it can be refined, perhaps, so that everybody can actually see it and clearly. But a lot of times, you guys who are AAC users, your initiation isn't so unclear if we really stopped and acknowledged that it was happening, right? I think most people are pretty resourceful and have come up with some pretty good ways to initiate. what they want to say. So it's a two-party thing, right? A sender and a receiver, always. Bella says, I'd love to meet your AAC students too. Or so I think she's saying so that they can understand us. Very important to learn from the AAC users. So I think Bella's volunteering, Amy. To
Hey, Bella, send me your email address. I will hit you up. I see Mason here on the call, and he's participated in my classes before also.
That's so great. Okay. And then let's see who it's, Emily says, exactly, yes, Amy, there are speaking and listening standards, so there's no reason why authentic communication interaction should not count towards state standard goals. And Bella said, for me, breakdowns are due to so many external and internal factors and executive functioning deficits. Those are not usually written on IEP goals. That's very good, Bella. Amy says, I would appreciate, Emily says, I would participate in your class. And Emily is in not too far from Cal State Northridge too. You're going to have a lot of speakers now, Amy. You won't even have to teach anymore.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. Any more goal ideas? Anybody? Okay, Diana says, as a teacher, there needs to be a foundational understanding of the presumption of competence to begin with by teachers and students. That's right. Everything seems to stem back to that. Do you want to go off mic and elaborate on that, Diana? I know you like that topic.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, I would love to. I'm actually here in Joaquin, my brother's house. He unfortunately decided to take a nap right now, but I'm hoping we'll get to share this recording with him, or he'll wake up and join us. But yeah, as a teacher, I think that goals are so important. And there's often times when, as a general education teacher, I've been a special ed teacher and a general ed teacher. And as a general education teacher, there are often times where, you see the goals and they're just these disconnected things that you have to be aware that this student who is being allowed, and I'm using air quotes as I'm saying allowed, to be included in your classroom for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours a day, that you should be aware of, so that you can somehow be creative and implement them incorporate them into your curriculum. And I think that there should, we obviously have to, because of PL 94-142, because we have IDEA, we need to have that contract between families and students and the schools, right? But we should be really in tune with authentic communication all the time, no matter if we're learning about reading or writing or math, social studies and science. We have to have communication and actual authentic inclusion being the foundation of education, and not just have these little, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of having these goals written out, because if we didn't have them, we probably wouldn't have any opportunity. People would be ignored, right? Because of the ableism that still does exist. But I think that so many educators don't understand that when they see a student who is non-speaking, that student is actually intelligent. We presume the opposite. We presume that they are not intelligent, and we still have a long way to go in that area. So I guess I hope I'm not off target with what we're talking about today.
No, not at all.
But it's important. We still have so far to go with just the basics, the foundational understanding of what it means to be human, and that there's a diverse array of experiences in humanity, and sometimes people communicate in different ways, and we need to honor and embrace that within our schools.
So Diana, when Jane is asking, can you explain authentic communication?
communication as,
Authentic communication.
yeah, authentic communication, meaning being able to communicate when you want to communicate, when you need to communicate, and having your communication not be just be heard, but also being honored, having that communication be acknowledged and honored, and having it mean something, that there's a relationship, like, you know, Amy was talking about how there has to be a connection and a relationship between the educators and their students. So not artificial communication, or just communication for sake of saying, okay, we communicated today. I asked him what color is his shirt, and he said red, you know, but like, I feel crappy today and I need you to back off a little bit. Being able to say those kinds of things instead of just, yes, I'm wearing blue jeans on a red shirt. Are you happy now? You know, having it actually be meaningful to the student, to the communicator.
And William, do you want to go in real quick and voice out, tell everybody what you just said in the chat? You want to say yours? Oops, you had to leave. There you go. He's getting himself set up there. Go for it, William. Regarding accommodations.
The accommodations need to be a part of my life at home and school and in the community. Having them written down to share helps.
Yeah, so in order to have that authentic communication, Williams has his accommodations clearly identified. And Tommy has her hand raised. I don't know where you are, Tommy, because you're not on my screen, but I hear you have your hand raised. Can we unmute Tommy?
Hi. Can you see me now? Let me put my hand down. Lower my hand. Hi, everyone. What a great turnout. I love how many AAC users there are in this call, Darlene. You got your people, Darlene. It's awesome. So I love this conversation, and Diana, that's my mantra, is the foundational belief systems drive everything. And so I'm almost saying, like, the goals are over here, and there's like 5 steps before those goals. Even crappy goals can be like fulfilled properly, let alone meaningful goals, you know? And so, like, first we have to see that potential in these students and those possibilities and presumed competence and capacity. But then it's, okay, what is their communication system? And if they don't have one established at all, it's establishing one that suits their needs, right? That suits their preferences and so forth. But then also, who's going to implement it? How is it going to be implemented consistently? You know, when so many of the schools won't even give an individual who needs this support that consistent one-on-one support. They've got maybe turnover of people with them. And even if they do have consistent one-on-one support, are they being trained and supervised well? You know, sometimes I feel so like, oh, you know, how can this be done well, so that so all of you amazing communicators who are just trying to learn and have, as I think Emma said, your rightful place, you know, can do that, because you rely so much on that support being attuned to you, respectful, intuitive, you know, responsive to what's going on with you in the moment. And so the goals come, you know what I mean? Because, like, you can't even think about getting to a goal if you don't have that communication support. So I'm not saying I have an answer. I just want to sort of point out that piece of, like, we can sit in an IEP and get the hours and get this and get the goals and get everything perfectly. And there is nobody there day to day sitting with that person, and they're not in an environment that supports and believes in them. It's like having, you know, a beautiful iPad in front of you that I mean, Dylan had an iPad and they made him, like, touch the quarter, touch the dollar, you know what I mean? Like, woo, you know, we're flying now, you know? So it just doesn't, you know, get anywhere. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there, because that's just, it's an entire mindset shift. It's an entire different, you know, approach to support. Just, they deserve it. They deserve it. So, wow.
Thanks, Tommy. Amy,
I
go.
just wanted to, I mean, if I could quickly respond and then maybe others might also, but it's like, I mean, it was a good question about goals, but it's like the goals are really for the program, right? For the school and for the environment. And there are, I'm blanking on the name of the tool. There's a tool that I've shared before with my students. And of course I'm at home and not in my office, so I can't pull it off of the shelf. But there's a tool with a checklist for qualities of a program that promotes positive communication access. Maybe somebody else might be familiar with it, but it's almost like we need to start there with like, what are the skills and systems set up to support communication access and expertise within the program as a whole. And if those are in place, then we zero in on the student and their unique needs. But it's like, without setting up the environment for success, you know, we're kind of placing somebody, even with great support, into an inaccessible environment is not going to address their needs either.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm blanking on the name of that tool, but I have it in my computer somewhere. I just won't be able to find it right now. If I find it, I'm going to share with everybody. Hey, William,
you.
look in the chat. There's a question for you, William. So I'll let you look at that and then you can answer that too. Yeah, that was good, Tommy and Diana and Amy. I saw here, hang on, what did I see? Oh, there was here's a question from Andreas. So that the user gets used to going to the iPad. Oh, wait, I get more here. Would you say that it is important to always use the iPad, for example, for all academic communication, so that the user gets used to going to the iPad and looks for ways to express themselves regarding content material? Any communicators want to jump in on that?
See,
Oh, you
Bella
guys
says no.
Emma says no.
No.
Okay.
Bella says no.
Oh, Bella says no. I always say they're the wrong. They're used to me saying that about them, the wrong names. So Bella says no. And actually, I think the question's for you, Will Stanford. And so Andrea says, I mean, some people might need consistency. Well, everybody needs consistent access to communication. That part, yes. But there's two different things, and I think especially in the world of autism, although it might affect other needs as well, but there's technology and then there's communication. And just because you give a person technology doesn't mean that they or the whole community knows how they're going to communicate with it. So you can be, you know, don't be afraid that you can't bounce around and have multimodality means of communication, because you're teaching that you got to be resourceful, right? And so you can, you're the communicator. And if you don't have your iPad with you, then you might use the book and point to it on the page or something else, but you're going to come up with different ways that you communicate as a communicator. Now, if you're trying to help the person get familiar with the iPad and where everything is on it and how it works, absolutely. But that's because you're teaching the technology, right? So you have the technology and then you have the act of communicating. And some people, just because you give them technology doesn't mean that they are skillful at communicating with it. And some environments are not skillful with understanding that the person's communicating with their technology. So the whole group has to learn about it, I think, too. So I don't know that I have a like hard, fast rule about it. It's just, it needs to be available. Communication needs to be available and expected all day. Let's see. Johnny, do you want to jump in and say something out loud? Because you got all these things. I don't know where you are, Johnny, but if we could unmute Johnny. Do you want to, Johnny? I don't know where Johnny is. Johnny. Help Ed.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. Wow. You guys, it's just an amazing conversation, and especially from all the AAC users, a wealth of information. My kids are both typers. They use the alphabet and they need a communication partner to communicate. And for us, it's been a complete game changer. And we're having a really hard time with the school system. I mean, even at Speech Language Developmental Center, where they were at before, a special ed school, my son was the only typer there. And the SLP said, well, I'll be fired if I do this with any other kids. Thank God for Darlene, because my kids wouldn't have any way to communicate if we hadn't met her. And so it's just, we're just having a really hard time in that model of special education and even inclusion, right? It's kind of taking me by surprise, because we're in an inclusive district now who is actually fighting us to even talk about what our kids need. And so there's just, for me now, of like, okay, I'm going to protect their mode of communication and their learning, and they're going to stay online and still learn that way. And we're not sending them to public school because I don't want them traumatized, and I don't want their mode of communication to be questioned. It's very foundational, you know, it's like they've made too much progress. So I just have so much emotion about this, and everything you guys are talking about, it's just so apropos to where we're at right now. So thank you, everybody. I guess I don't really have a question. It's just more of like, angst.
Yeah, let it out. I think you should invite William to your IEPs. So William, he put it more pearls of wisdom in the chat here. Is it programmed in your device, William, already, or do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
The thing about motivation is it comes from freedom to choose. How can you be motivated to do what has already been determined?
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Tim, you going to say something?
No. I agree with all of the no's, because the user should not rely on one device, because AAC devices are constantly changing. There are brand new technology out there in the works that is going to use artificial intelligence. It's coming. The tablet format is old technology. The future is very exciting. I can't talk about anything further because I've signed many NDAs, but it's changing.
Those are non-disclosure acts, he's saying. That he signed some non-disclosures. Yeah, you know, that's kind of mind-blowing, Tim. That, you know, when you think about how, like, we're used to going to brick and mortar schools, and that's what we all do. And now we're all like getting much more comfortable with virtual. And so now we're like, well, what should we do? Should we do virtual? Should we do brick and mortar? What should we do here? Should we do homeschooling? Should we do public schooling? What should we do? So the world is just opening up. And then you go and throw in that little grenade of, and now it's going into AI, which is artificial intelligence. And wow. Can you imagine? I love it.
Can I ask a question of the group?
Absolutely.
It's kind of connected to what Johnny was talking about, but I guess, and I feel like it might be a very naive question, so please excuse that it might be very naive. So in my experience with inclusive education, I've experienced a lot of many instances of people being afraid of kids coming. The kid is going to be included, especially somebody with complex communication needs. They might have significant physical disabilities as well. And there's a lot of fear around the student starting, and sometimes a lot of resistance, particularly around, well, around communication access. And then once the student starts and the kids get to know the student, and the teachers, especially general and special education teachers, get to know the students, a lot of times again, this is why it might be naive, but in my experience, a lot of that like bluster that was preceding it, really it kind of dissipates because we get to know you as an individual and learn the unique ways that you communicate. And I guess I'm just kind of wondering for the AAC users on here, and maybe that some of the parents also, if that's been your experience, that there's this fear, but then once you get together and actually have time together, that some of that fear around the communication access starts to go away.
Mhm. That's a good point. Thoughts on that, you guys? Who says, Amy, yes, my daughter experienced that bluster, but once they got to know her, it got better. Andrea says, I wish we had that problem. My son is in a separate facility. Mhm. Valerie,
I guess
are you waving, Valerie? Do you want to say something? Happy to see you. Okay, I'm asking you to unmute.
So Emily started typing after she was high school, so she never really had the real access to communication in school. But we did have she was a fully included student. And in that process, we did find that there was incredible resistance to the process. And she's older, Emily's 30. So this was starting in 1991, and we insisted on inclusion starting when she was 5 years old. So, we really had a lot of resistance. We started off with the so-called mainstreaming, which was a total joke, because that concept of a teacher not taking her as their own was a huge issue. The teachers really need to learn to take the student as their own. And she was constantly viewed as an interloper. She was kind of like there for arts or crafts or whatever. And they didn't. But as she went on, and we actually moved on from the concept of mainstreaming into full inclusion, there started to be a little bit more of a pattern and a greater level of acceptance. But a lot of it is a function, I think, of the kids in the class and a lot of parental attitudes. And she was all the way through public school. There was a brief step into non-public school, but she was there all the way through. And it is a learning, you have to educate people, and you have to really insist that they do what's expected of them. With the professionals, the teachers, the staff, and be very demanding. And that is the only way that we were successful in inclusion. And it was huge. It is so key, in my mind, inclusion. And Darlene knows that I worked in this field for a long time, and there were some parents that didn't want it, but I felt inclusion was the difference between getting extremely rote education and actually having a broad expanse. And so you fight for it, but there's resistance. And I don't know what the environment is now. She's been out of public school now for 9 years. So, but even when she went into junior college, it was, a question of educating people and explaining it. So it continues. The process continues all the way through the educational experience, but it has to be demanded. And we as parents and the individuals who type need to demand. That's what I have to say.
It's about expectations, right?
Yeah, in fear.
I think get those expectations up. Anybody else? Andrea says, thank you, Valerie. Okay, we had another thought, and that was, and it's going to kind of lead us into next month's topic, but what about getting communication after high school? So how are you guys how are your communication needs being made as you transition into adult life? Anybody have any pearls of wisdom? William, Beas, you want to jump in on how that might work? Or what the barriers or challenges are, if any, maybe nobody. Sue says fell off a cliff. Okay. Jeremy says truly very hard when they don't believe, but I ended up writing a graduation speech.
I think one of the,
Go for it, Mary.
Okay, sure. So I think one of the biggest barriers, honestly, has nothing to do with whether or not you have a disability. It's the whole transition, because anyone can find that difficult. And so when we have communication needs, then that just makes it even harder. So, I mean, I found that having a very supportive family and a great DOR counselor were essential, but a lot of it is kind of trial and error. And it's, you know, a matter of trying to understand what you want so that you can ask for it. But it's really difficult because you don't always know what you want when you're 18. So
That's true. Thanks. That's perfect. And know, and for the younger families in here, know that if a school district buys a communication system for you, it's not yours, it's the school's. So when you get to that graduation time with a diploma, or ending out at your 22nd year here, if you are using a school system, then you want to make sure you have it all figured out for that transition. Otherwise you'll be left with nothing, technically, unless they're nice and they say keep it till you get something new. But just that's not always known to people, that it's not really your system, it's their system. You're using it. Okay. Ed, do you wanted to add in here?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was just chattering
Okay.
in the chat. I am not an AAC user, but I do have communication access needs, and I totally co-sign what Veas has said. We find ways to operate in a system that we're in, and anyone who has communication access needs knows what I mean. And then we are pushed in, and they may not be ideal, but they're what we have, and we become used to them. And then we're pushed into a new system, whether that's employment, whether that's the transition age programs that many folks go through, whether that's college. We're pushed into a new system where A, we don't know anybody, B, we may not even know what accommodations are possible in this new environment, or C, we may not even, if we haven't received sufficient support, as many of us haven't in the school system, we may not even know what accommodations might fully assist us. So I just wanted to toss that out there.
Yeah, hard to ask for something you don't know you need. William's still creating here, so we'll let him, he's going to chime in when he gets done. Susan has a question. Susan, can we unmute Susan?
One moment.
Okay.
All right, Susan, there you go.
Hi. I'm new to the group. Tammy told me about the webinar today, and I have a younger child, and I don't know if this is like off topic, and he's 6 and he's nonverbal, and he's learning to use an AAC, and it's called LAMP. And I'm always concerned. I feel like I would like to see him like use it on his own, like, you know, go and get it, even if it's like on the table, but he's not as motivated to go get his voice to use. I see him like if it's on the table where he usually eats at, and if he's thirsty and his water cup is not right there, then he'll go and, you know, initiate that. But besides that, like how, like any advice, like how he can like get motivated to want to use it more, maybe?
That's a good question. And maybe some communicators can chime in as well on their ideas on how to help that process happen. As a professional, what I've seen is that, I mean, like William said, you can't tell somebody to be motivated, right?
Yeah.
You set up scenarios. And that's where we have that expectation, but it's really about supporting him to be a communicator, because then you're sending the message that I expect you to be a part of this. And so if you see him, if the communication device is on the kitchen counter and he's on the couch and he's getting kind of fidgety, like he wants you to change the channel or something, you can, you know, don't feel guilty. Go get the device and say, hey, what is it you need? We have to have our thing with us to talk, you know, and then put it on the coffee table instead of the kitchen counter. And kind of don't make it a rule, support him to do that. It's kind of like, I always think about it in terms of, as a speech and language person, when we're working with speaking people, speaking children, and we're expecting them to learn to speak language, right? We give them all kinds of models, all kinds of supports, all kinds of suggestions, all kinds of opportunities to recreate. But when we work with people who use AAC, we put so much on them to perform. And it's not cheating to give that support to him. It's not going to make him dependent on this support unless I call some of my clients, and I love them all, but I'll say, so you're acting as Prince whoever, because you're waiting for us to do everything for you. But we're not going to create that kind of a scenario, but it's okay to support a person. And if he's struggling, go get it and say, hey, here, tell me what you're thinking. And then put it on the counter in front of him so that he can have easier access to it. Especially as he's learning.
And I usually bring it to him and say, what do you want? And then he has this new thing where he's like, I don't know if he's stimming on it, but he'll just push, like, he likes the sound of different words. So I'll say like, oh, do you want more? Or, he'll say like, oh, I want to play iPad. But then before he pushes the correct sentence that he wants to say, he'll push like different icons, like AH, just because he likes the sound of that word, or maybe, and then he'll type like all these like unique sentences, like, I want eat, play iPad, eat, like, and why do they do that? Just because they like to hear of that?
Well, that's what speaking kids do, right? If you're a 2-year-old and you're working on your talking, you sit and you play with your toys and you talk. And sometimes they even come up to us and they do this jibber jabber and you go, that was a great story. I love that. And you have no idea what they said, right? That's how people engage with language. Now, if you asked him a real question and that was what you got as an answer, then I would point that out to him that you didn't answer my question. But if he's exploring his device, then that's fine. You can switch it around, let him explore, and then have the expectation that he take a real turn, because we're really talking right now.
Yes. So is it
all on
okay if I
us, right?
ask him to try again? Like if he starts like not making sense and he's trying to push all this icon, can I like redirect and say, oh, try again? What were you trying to say?
Right. Say, I didn't get that. What did you want to say? Yeah.
Oh,
And then maybe he's just playing and making up a story with you, or he's exploring the buttons so he can learn them. Right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, William, you want to jump in?
The time after high school has me thinking, understanding me, and my communication needs starts over. We need more collaboration.
You got to pull your team in, right? That's perfect. Evelyn has a question with her hand raised, so let's unmute Evelyn real quick here. Evelyn Rodriguez.
Hola, buenas tardes, Darlene. Yo quería decir, en el caso de la mamá que dijo, en mi caso como mamá, yo llevo el dispositivo a todos lados cuando está con mi hijo en la comunidad, en la casa, porque a él no le gusta cargarlo. ¿Hago pausas para que me traduzcas o sigo hablando?
Right. That's a good point.
Perfecto. Entonces, lo que tiene que aprender el niño, que yo, por ejemplo, le digo a mi hijo, usa tu lenguaje, y le enseño el device, se lo doy, usa tu lenguaje. Y si él, ayudándole a puchar las teclas, I want popcorn, por ejemplo, inmediatamente, oh, popcorn, tú quieres popcorn. Entonces, eso le hace al niño decir qué tan poderoso es usar el device, porque se deja entender y obtiene lo que quiere. Yo creo que se trata de tener como mamás, tener fe que eso trabaja, funciona. Es muy difícil a veces con la rutina de mamás en la casa utilizarlo todo el tiempo, pero sí he visto resultados realmente. Yo también uso LAMP con mi hijo. Me encanta LAMP porque aparte tiene unos cuadernos, unos libros con unos visuales grandes, con unos iconos para machar, que uno puede trabajar con el niño, que en el caso de educación especial, la terapista me enseña a mí y somos un equipo, ¿no? Y todos tenemos que estar en la misma página. Esa es la idea. Gracias.
That's perfect. And so LAMP is another communication app, or it can be in a device, an actual vendor device, or it can be on your iPad, made by Prinky Romick, just so you know. But that's perfect, Evelyn. And I love how you said that it's everybody. Everybody has to be using the system. Everybody has to be supportive of the system, and so true.
I just wanted to add that, Evelyn, what you were saying is really consistent with what Mason was saying. He was saying he's an AAC user, and he said parents should also model on the device. You use the device to ask them questions.
Oh, perfect point, Mason. Yes. Yeah. In the old days, teachers used to make people guess, like, find the shoe, find taco, right? And it was a big test all the time. Like Amy said, don't test. It was a big test, but you don't sit in front of your speaking child, again, as an example, and say, guess what I'm thinking? You say, do you want a taco? And so point to the taco picture, let the taco be said, and then say to eat a taco, go for taco, however, just model it, use it yourself, because that's how we all learn language. That's perfect, Mason. You're absolutely correct. It's such an important thing. And it's actually getting to be more and more widespread knowledge, like common knowledge. So in the schools, hopefully someone in the room will know what you're talking about. Still new though, so don't, you might be the one teaching, but it is getting to be much more common knowledge. So expect that for sure. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. So I think I want to say thank you to Dr. Amy Hanreddy. This has been such a fun conversation. I love it.
Totally
so
fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, anytime, please come back. And I want to thank the CDAN committee here. We have William Del Rosario is an intern with us, and Veas, I won't say your last name, Veas. Veas is an intern with us, and Nina Spiegelman is one of the other DVU persons on this team. Thank you. And I think Judy Mark might still be here, but I'm not sure. And Ed Herzl is working the background. There's Judy waving. Ed's working our background as always. And then we have DRC. We have Megan Lizette. And I think I saw Raymond pop on. I don't know if he's still around or not. But we had Raymond Kwan on here too from the DRC, who the grant is with them as well. So thank you to all of, and if I missed anybody, I'm sorry. We have some DVU board members here too. But thank you. And thank you to all the AAC communicators. I am so excited that you guys are so actively participating in this group and hopefully in many groups, so that your voices can be heard, because it really does start chipping away at that big old mountain that we're trying to just make disintegrate, and when you are in the front saying what you need. I'm so excited about that. So thank you all for doing that as well. Next month, we will have Joe de Guzman from the Department of Rehab. So we've invited him to come and talk about what can Department of Rehab offer and how can they be a service for you, especially in this transition to adult service or college, whatever route you're going. What's their role and how can they help? And then hopefully they can hear from all of you AAC users on what kind of things you need assistance with too. That would be, I'm sure, good information for them. So please come back for that. Oh, I want to thank Lorna Silva, our fabulous translator. There she is. Okay, I see her on my screen here. Thank you, Lorna. You always do an amazing job. And she's always there for us too. So thank you again.
And thank you, Darlene. Thank you, Darlene.
Absolutely.
You are everything.
My pleasure. All right, and Tim Jin, thank you from Ability Central. Thank you, Tim. Ex-DVU, moved up in the world, now he's with Ability Central. Thanks for joining us.
Is that
All
really
right.
moving up? I'm not sure, but we'll talk about that. Thanks. Amazing program. Thanks, everybody.
All right, good night.